On a cold Sunday evening in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, Laura was folding laundry in her bedroom when she heard a soft knock on her door, the kind that carries hesitation with it, and before she could answer, Ethan's voice came through, lower than usual, almost uncertain, asking if he could talk for a minute, and something in that tone made her heart tighten because she had known him since he was 13, since the day she married his father Michael and stepped into a life she never expected, becoming a stepmother to a quiet boy who kept his feelings locked behind polite smiles. But now he was 19, taller than both of them, studying at a local college, and standing in the hallway with his hands pushed deep into his hoodie pockets like he was bracing himself for something difficult. When she opened the door, she saw it clearly in his eyes, not trouble, not rebellion, but confusion mixed with trust. And that combination made her step aside and invite him in without asking more questions, because sometimes the bravest thing a young person can do is admit they don't have answers, and she did not want to waste that moment with nervous jokes or small talk. He sat on the edge of the chair near her window, staring at the floor for a second before finally saying he needed advice about Hannah, the girl he had been seeing for a few months. The girl who made him smile at his phone late at night and leave the house dressed with more care than usual, and Laura felt a wave of understanding because she remembered being that age, when every feeling seemed bigger than the world itself, when love felt like standing at the edge of something beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Ethan explained quickly, words rushing out as if he feared losing courage, that things were getting serious between them, that his friends kept making comments about growing up and taking the next step, that some of them acted like being in a relationship was a competition, and though he laughed along with them, inside he felt unsure, not because he didn't care about Hannah but because he cared too much and did not want to treat something meaningful like a challenge to win. He admitted he didn't know how to tell if he was ready for deeper commitment, how to separate real feelings from pressure, how to protect Hannah's heart and his own at the same time, and Laura listened without interrupting, noticing how his hands trembled slightly, noticing how hard it was for him to even say these things aloud, and in that moment she understood that this was not a reckless question but a responsible one, not a boy asking for permission but a young man asking for wisdom. She chose her response carefully, keeping her voice calm and steady, telling him that growing up is not about proving anything to friends, that real maturity shows when someone can pause instead of rush, that the first serious step in any relationship should come from trust and comfort rather than outside noise. And as she spoke she saw his shoulders relax just a little, as if someone had finally given him permission to breathe. He confessed that Hannah never pressured him, that she seemed just as nervous as he felt, but neither of them wanted to disappoint the other, and Laura smiled softly because she recognized that gentle fear, the fear of losing something good by moving too slow or too fast, and she told him that if two people truly care, they can talk openly about their worries instead of guessing, that silence creates more mistakes than honesty ever will. Ethan looked up then, searching her face to see if she judged him, but he found only understanding, and that surprised him more than anything, because he had expected embarrassment or awkwardness, not a steady conversation like two adults discussing life. Laura explained that respect is the strongest foundation of love, that when someone values another person's feelings above outside opinions, they are already showing maturity. And she reminded him that every important decision in life should feel peaceful afterward, not heavy. And if a choice creates anxiety instead of confidence, that is a sign to slow down. The clock ticked quietly in the room as they talked, the house calm with Michael still out running errands, and Laura realized how rare this moment was, a stepmother and stepson sitting across from each other not as strangers tied by marriage but as two human beings sharing honest thoughts. And she felt grateful that Ethan trusted her enough to knock on her door instead of hiding confusion behind pride. He asked her directly what she would do in his place, and she paused, thinking back to her own youth in Seattle when she had once confused attention with love and rushed decisions because she feared being left behind, and though she did not share details, she shared the lesson, telling him that true connection grows stronger with patience, that if something is meant to last it will not disappear because you chose to wait, and that love built slowly often stands longer. Ethan listened with focus, absorbing each word as if storing it carefully, and then he admitted that part of him felt relieved just saying these fears out loud, that maybe what he needed most was not instructions but reassurance that uncertainty was normal, and Laura nodded because it was true. Uncertainty is not weakness, it is awareness. She encouraged him to have an honest conversation with Hannah, to tell her exactly what he had told Laura, to admit he wanted their relationship to be based on trust rather than outside expectations, and she promised him that no matter what he decided, the choice should come from a place of care, not pressure. When he finally stood to leave, the tension in his posture had eased, replaced by thoughtful calm, and before stepping into the hallway he turned back and thanked her, not dramatically but sincerely, and that simple thank you carried weight because it meant he felt heard. After he left the room, Laura sat quietly for a few moments, reflecting on how quickly children grow, how one day they need help tying shoes and the next they are asking about life's biggest emotional steps, and she understood that what she had done was not extraordinary in action but powerful in impact, because she chose to listen instead of react, to guide instead of judge, and though she had no idea how the story with Hannah would unfold, she knew one thing for certain, that knock on her door had marked a turning point, not just in Ethan's life as he stepped carefully toward adulthood, but in her own heart as she realized that sometimes the most important role a parent figure can play is simply being brave enough to have the hard conversation, and as the evening light faded through her window, she sensed that this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them fully understood yet. The next afternoon Laura texted Ethan and asked him to meet her at a small coffee shop near the lake in Evanston, a quiet place with wide windows and soft music where conversations felt safe. And when he walked in wearing his gray jacket and that same uncertain expression, she could tell he had been thinking nonstop since their talk the night before. They ordered hot chocolate and sat by the window while cold wind brushed against the glass, and for a moment neither of them spoke, but the silence was not awkward, it was thoughtful, like both of them understood this was not just another casual chat. Laura decided to move first, telling Ethan that before she gave him any more advice, she wanted to share something about her own past, not details that would embarrass him, but lessons that had shaped her, and she explained how when she was 19 in Seattle she had once believed that saying yes quickly would prove she was mature, how she had thought moving fast meant holding on to someone she cared about, and how that belief came from fear of being left behind rather than true readiness. Ethan listened carefully, surprised to hear her speak so honestly, and she told him that she had learned the hard way that when decisions come from pressure, even silent pressure, they leave confusion afterward, but when they come from peace, they bring confidence. She explained that real connection grows in layers, like building a house brick by brick, and that skipping steps might feel exciting for a moment but can weaken the foundation later. And as she spoke she saw something shift in Ethan's eyes, not embarrassment but understanding. He admitted that some of his friends treated relationships like milestones to achieve, comparing stories as if they were competing, and even though he laughed with them, their words stayed in his head long after, making him question himself. Laura told him that friends often speak from their own insecurity, not from wisdom, and that strength is not shown by following the crowd but by standing firm in what feels right. She leaned forward slightly and asked him one simple question. When you think about Hannah, do you feel calm or rushed? And he paused, staring at the steam rising from his cup, then answered honestly that when he was alone with her he felt calm, safe, and respected, but when he was around his friends he felt rushed. That answer alone seemed to clear part of the fog around him. Laura smiled gently and told him that the calm feeling was the one he should trust, because love should feel steady, not like a race. She suggested he talk openly with Hannah, not about expectations set by others but about what they both truly wanted for their future, reminding him that a strong relationship grows through honest conversations, not silent assumptions. Ethan worried that bringing it up might make things awkward, but Laura explained that awkward moments are small compared to the pain of misunderstanding. and she told him that if Hannah cared for him the way he believed she did, she would appreciate his honesty rather than judge it. He asked her if waiting would make him seem weak, and she answered firmly that patience is one of the strongest choices a person can make, because it shows control, respect, and emotional depth. As the afternoon light shifted across the table, Ethan began to look less like a confused teenager and more like a thoughtful young man weighing his values, and Laura felt proud not because she was solving his problem but because he was brave enough to face it. She added that every important step in life should align with who he wants to become, not just who he feels pressured to be right now, and she reminded him that adulthood is not defined by speed but by responsibility. Ethan nodded slowly, saying he never wanted Hannah to feel like she was part of a checklist or expectation, that he truly cared about her happiness and wanted their bond to grow naturally. Laura reassured him that expressing that care directly would likely strengthen their connection, not weaken it. She shared one more lesson from her past, explaining how she once stayed silent in a relationship because she feared conflict, and how that silence created distance instead of closeness, and she urged him not to repeat that mistake. By the time their cups were empty, the nervous tension that had followed him into the cafe seemed to have dissolved into thoughtful confidence. He looked at her with gratitude and said he felt lighter, like he finally understood that readiness is not something others decide for you. As they stepped outside into the cool air, he promised he would speak to Hannah that evening, honestly and calmly, and Laura reminded him that whatever they decided together would be right as long as it came from mutual respect. She watched him walk toward his car with steadier steps than before, and in that moment she realized that what she was really teaching him was not about a single decision but about how to handle every serious choice in life, with patience, clarity, and courage. Later that night, as she prepared dinner, she wondered how the conversation would go, but she felt at peace knowing she had guided him without judgment. A few hours later, Ethan returned home with a thoughtful expression, not upset, not overly excited, just calm, and he told her they had talked openly for the first time about their fears and expectations, discovering that Hannah felt the same pressure from her own friends and had been afraid to bring it up. Hearing that, Laura felt a quiet sense of relief, because it proved that honesty builds bridges where silence creates walls. Ethan said they agreed to move at a pace that felt right for both of them, focusing on building trust and understanding first. And as he spoke there was a maturity in his voice that had not been there days earlier. Laura realized that sometimes the most powerful help is not dramatic action but steady guidance, and as the evening settled over their Illinois home, she sensed that this conversation had changed something deeper than either of them had expected, setting the stage for growth not just in Ethan's relationship with Hannah but in his journey toward becoming a thoughtful, respectful man who chooses love over pressure. Every time when Michael came home that evening to their quiet house in the Chicago suburbs, he sensed something had shifted, not in a bad way but in a thoughtful way, the kind of feeling that hangs in the air after an important conversation. And as he placed his keys on the kitchen counter he noticed Laura standing by the stove, calm yet reflective, and he asked casually how her day had been, but she heard the deeper question behind his tone, so instead of brushing it off she told him the truth, explaining that Ethan had come to her for advice about his relationship with Hannah and that they had met at a cafe to talk things through. At first Michael's expression tightened slightly, not out of anger but from instinct, because fathers often feel protective when their sons step into adulthood, and he leaned against the counter listening carefully as Laura described how Ethan felt pressure from friends, how he feared making a mistake, how he wanted to do the right thing but needed guidance. She spoke clearly and calmly, choosing words that showed respect for Ethan's trust, and as she explained how she encouraged patience, honesty, and communication, Michael's guarded posture slowly softened. He asked a few direct questions, wanting to understand exactly what had been discussed, and Laura answered without hesitation, making it clear that the conversation had been about emotional readiness and responsibility, not anything inappropriate. And she emphasized that Ethan had approached her because he felt safe and unsure at the same time. Michael walked to the window and stared outside for a moment, processing the idea that his son was no longer a boy asking about homework but a young man facing adult emotions, and there was a quiet mix of pride and disbelief in his eyes. He admitted that part of him felt surprised Ethan had gone to Laura instead of him, but Laura gently reminded him that sometimes sons fear disappointing their fathers, especially when it comes to sensitive topics, and that Ethan likely needed a voice that felt less intimidating. Michael sighed softly, understanding the truth in that, and after a pause he said something that meant more than Laura expected. He said he was grateful Ethan had someone wise enough to guide him instead of ignoring his confusion. Later that night Michael knocked on Ethan's bedroom door, mirroring the way Ethan had knocked on Laura's door days before, and when Ethan opened it, Michael stepped inside and sat down calmly. Not with authority but with openness, he told his son he knew about the cafe conversation and that he wasn't upset, only concerned about making sure Ethan felt supported by both of them, and Ethan's shoulders relaxed at that, because the last thing he wanted was tension between the two adults he loved. Michael explained that growing up comes with pressure from every direction, especially for young men who feel they must prove themselves. But he made it clear that real strength is shown through patience and respect, echoing the very message Laura had shared. Ethan listened carefully, surprised but relieved that his father wasn't angry or strict, and he admitted he had been nervous to talk to him at first because he didn't want to seem inexperienced or confused. Michael responded honestly, telling him that confusion at 19 is normal, that no one has life perfectly figured out, and that mistakes often happen when people pretend to be more ready than they are. The conversation lasted longer than either expected, covering not just relationships but goals, values, and the kind of man Ethan wanted to become, and by the end of it, there was a new layer of understanding between father and son, one built not on control but on trust. Over the next few days the house felt lighter, conversations at dinner became more open, and Ethan carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from knowing he had guidance instead of judgment. 1 week later he returned home from spending time with Hannah, his expression calm and thoughtful, and when Laura asked casually how things were going, he shared that he had taken her advice and spoken honestly with Hannah about everything, including his fears and the pressure he felt. He explained that Hannah had confessed she felt similar pressure from her own friends and social media, but deep down she valued their connection more than any outside expectations, and together they agreed to slow down and focus on building trust first. Hearing that, Laura felt a wave of quiet pride, not because she had controlled the outcome but because Ethan had handled it with maturity. Later that evening Michael joined them on the porch, and Ethan shared the same update with him, and instead of teasing or dismissing it, Michael simply nodded and said he respected the decision, reinforcing the message that adulthood is not about rushing but about choosing wisely. As the sun set over their neighborhood, casting warm orange light across the yard, Laura reflected on how easily things could have gone differently if fear or silence had ruled the situation, how misunderstandings could have created distance between her and Michael or between father and son, but instead honesty had strengthened every bond in the house. She realized that trust is fragile but powerful, and that by answering Ethan's first knock with patience she had opened a door not just for him but for their whole family. In the days that followed, Ethan focused more on his studies and his relationship with Hannah felt steadier, free from the tension of outside noise, and Michael occasionally checked in with him in a casual way, creating a new rhythm of communication that felt natural rather than forced. Laura watched these small changes with gratitude, understanding that what happened was not dramatic or shocking but deeply meaningful, because it proved that difficult topics do not have to divide families when handled with respect. One quiet evening, as she and Michael sat together after dinner, he reached for her hand and thanked her for guiding Ethan the way she did, admitting that she had approached the situation with a calm he might not have managed at first, and she smiled softly, knowing that parenting, whether by blood or by marriage, often means stepping into unexpected roles with courage. In that simple moment she understood that part 3 of their story was not about conflict but about alignment, about a family choosing communication over assumption, and as the house settled into peaceful silence that night, Laura felt certain that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together, stronger than before because trust had replaced fear and understanding had replaced doubt. Spring arrived gently in their quiet Illinois neighborhood, melting the last of winter and bringing longer evenings filled with soft light, and with the change in season came a quiet change in Ethan too, because the restless tension that once followed him had faded into steady confidence, and one Friday night, after returning from a walk with Hannah along the lakefront, he knocked on Laura's door again, but this time the knock was firm, not hesitant, and when she opened it she immediately noticed the difference in his eyes. There was peace there, not confusion. He stepped inside and told her he just wanted to talk for a minute, and as they sat across from each other in the same room where everything had started, he shared that he and Hannah had spent the past few months building their relationship slowly, having honest talks about their goals, their fears, and their future, and instead of feeling pressure from friends or social media, they had learned to tune it out, choosing what felt right for them rather than what looked impressive to others. He explained that they had decided together to wait before taking any major steps, not because they were afraid, but because they wanted their connection to grow deeper first, and as he spoke there was pride in his voice, not the loud pride of showing off, but the quiet pride of someone who made a thoughtful choice. Laura felt her eyes sting slightly because she realized this was the result of that first brave conversation. And Ethan thanked her sincerely, saying that without her guidance he might have rushed into something he wasn't emotionally prepared for, and that her advice had helped him understand that real maturity is about respect and patience. Later that evening Michael joined them on the back porch, the sky painted pink and gold by the setting sun, and Ethan repeated what he had said inside, telling his father he felt good about the path he and Hannah were on, and Michael listened carefully before placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder, saying he was proud not because of what Ethan had done or not done, but because he had chosen honesty and responsibility. The moment felt simple yet powerful, a family standing together in understanding rather than conflict, and Laura sensed that something important had settled into place within their home. Weeks passed, and Ethan's relationship with Hannah continued to grow stronger, built on shared laughter, study sessions, weekend drives, and long talks about their dreams after college. And though they were still young, they carried themselves with more awareness than many adults twice their age. One afternoon Hannah came over for dinner, and Laura watched the way Ethan treated her, with kindness, with attentiveness, with the same calm respect he had spoken about months earlier, and she knew then that the lesson had taken root. After dinner, as the young couple washed dishes together in the kitchen, Michael leaned toward Laura and whispered that she had handled everything better than he could have imagined, and she smiled softly because she understood now that what had seemed like a shocking question at first had actually been a gift, an opportunity to guide instead of react. Later that night, Ethan knocked one final time before heading to bed, and he told Laura something that surprised her even more than his original question. He said that one day, if he ever had children of his own, he hoped he could be the kind of parent who listens first and judges later, and hearing that made her realize that the true impact of her decision would stretch far beyond this moment. As summer approached and graduation plans filled the calendar, Ethan prepared for an internship in another state, and though the idea of distance worried him and Hannah at first, they approached it with the same openness they had learned, choosing communication over fear. And when the day came for him to pack his bags, Laura stood in the driveway watching him load the car, remembering the unsure young man who once stood outside her bedroom door, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken together. Before he left, Ethan hugged both her and Michael tightly, thanking them for trusting him to grow at his own pace, and Laura realized that the unbelievable part of the story was not dramatic or scandalous. It was the simple truth that love guided by maturity can change the direction of a life. That evening, after the car disappeared down the street, she and Michael sat quietly on the porch again, reflecting on how close they had come to misunderstanding the situation in the beginning, and how choosing patience had strengthened their family instead of dividing it. Laura understood that sometimes the most powerful action is not loud or extreme, but gentle and steady, like offering calm words in a moment of fear. And as the stars appeared one by one in the clear sky, she felt certain that Ethan would carry those lessons with him wherever he went. Months later, when he called to say that he and Hannah were still together, still building something meaningful despite the distance, Laura smiled with quiet pride, knowing that what she had truly done was help a young man discover his own values. In the end, her choice was simple yet life-changing. She had chosen to listen, to guide, and to trust, and because of that, a family grew stronger, a relationship grew healthier, and a young man stepped into adulthood with confidence rooted not in pressure, but in respect and love.